Welcome to Conversations with the Planets with Lori Kaufman and Alicia Cielle Heiser, a podcast that roots the wisdom of the stars into our lived experiences here on Earth and weaves the power of diverse healing modalities together with astrology. I'm Alicia Cielle Heiser, an astrologer, herbalist, and witch living in Oregon on Kalapuya land, and I offer astrology consultations and teachings aimed at helping you honor your most authentic self and trust your intuition.
I'm Lori Kaufman, an astrologer, tarot reader, writer, and teacher. I co-lead the Asteroid Special Interest Research Group for NCGR, an astrology organization, and I offer all different sorts of readings, online and in person.
Hey everyone, we're back and we're gonna talk about some examples and examples specifically about house rulership. So I wanted to share my mom's adorable little dog Cleo because I feel like she is such a good example of my mom's sixth house. And Cleo's not really enjoying being held, so I'm gonna put her down, but I just wanted you to all see her. Um, but my mom is a Sagittarius rising, so she has a Taurus sixth house, and Cleo is literally a cow. She's black and white. She eats grass constantly on her walks. She's also very Taurus in the like stop and smell the roses like sentiment of Taurus where she just is stopping and sometimes she even eats daisies. It's adorable. But she's just snacking all the time. She's moving slowly. She's really chill and relaxed and luxurious. And then my mom's progressed Venus is in Pisces, which is Venus's place of exaltation. And so it's also just like this amazing, perfect little floof. It's like very exalted Venus because the ruler of your sixth house can literally be your pet. And so that is just one example. Lori, did you want to talk about Leo?
Yeah. So my sixth house is Sagittarius, and I do have my North Node there, but otherwise it's an empty house. And my little guy, do you want to come up here? See if I can bribe him with some treats. Um, so he's actually, I do have his birth time because I knew who I got him from. She basically birthed them. So she was there for it. And so I like did get lucky enough to actually know the time that he was born, and he was actually born the exact minute of an eclipse. And he's a Sagittarius rising. So I do think it's really interesting that the eclipse was in the Leo Aquarius axis. He was born on the full moon on the 27th of July in 2018. But being a Sagittarius rising, and that being my sixth house and being born on an eclipse is very funny.
And you
Very
mentioned you
literal.
have your North Node in Sag in your sixth,
Yeah,
right? Or
yeah,
South
with
Node?
my
Is it
North
North or
Node.
South? Okay.
It's my North Node there, yeah.
Yeah, so just we're using examples to really show how literal using house
Oh, there
rulership and
he
house
is.
topics can be.
He appeared.
Yeah, there's the little eclipse demon.
My demon with his nail clipper, his fancy nails on so he doesn't scratch people.
Aw. So
Oh,
cute.
all right,
And
here's
then
your treat.
I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen again so we can keep the house topics in front of us. Um, and then I have another sixth house example because my moon and Saturn are both in my Pisces sixth house, and I have a night chart. So my moon is my sect light as well. And then I have Jupiter and Mars in my Sagittarius third house. And I feel like my chart is a really good example of ways that having a planet in domicile, having my very dignified Jupiter and Sag, which my Jupiter also has triplicity because it's in a fire sign and a night chart. And so my Jupiter brings a lot of good into my life, but my Jupiter also has to deal with both Mars in Sagittarius and Saturn in Pisces. And so when you have a strong planet, especially a strong benefic, it's not that it will stop the malefics from being malefic in your chart, but it might be able to soften the impact or the harshness of it. And so, one example of that was last year. Mars and Saturn conjoined on my moon in Pisces. There was a Mars Saturn conjunction 1 degree away from my moon, and I've shared this before in other episodes, but I ended up tearing my ACL while skiing, which is also interesting because Saturn rules my fifth house. Saturn's in my sixth house. I'm in my Saturn return. So I'm like, okay, this sports injury is a really big part of my Saturn return story. And so Jupiter wasn't able to stop the injury from occurring. But I ended up, like, I live in the United States. Health insurance here is horrible. But I had magically, had marketplace insurance, and then there was this COVID era policy where some people also qualified for Medicaid as supplementary insurance. And so I ended up having so much health insurance that I barely had to pay for any of my recovery costs or my surgery or my PT or really anything related to the surgery for my ACL, which is unheard of in the United States. And then I'm also an herbalist. So I already had all of these, knowing about arnica and calendula and St. John's wort and all these herbs that were really helpful with my recovery process. And it was a ski related injury. So many skiers have had knee injuries. So there was all this community support and people coming through and suggesting, oh, make sure you're biking a lot, or go to this specific sports clinic for this thing. And I just had a lot of community support, which is really my Jupiter's triplicity coming through. I had an amazing surgeon. I live, at the time, I got my surgery in Corvallis, Oregon, which actually has incredible athletic medicine because of Oregon State University. I've had access to isokinetic testing, which is really, really good testing to show how strong my right leg is in comparison to my left leg through my recovery process, and give me really targeted feedback for my PT. And so Saturn still Saturned. I still tore my ACL, but my Jupiter and Sag came in and was able to give all of this support and all of this resource, so that my whole injury, I've just said that I intend to be stronger and more capable at the end than I was at the start. And I feel like now, almost 10 months post surgery, I'm really starting to feel like I'm getting to that point. And so the Jupiter help really came through, even though it was a much more difficult experience than I think Jupiter would have preferred to give me, because it's also my Saturn return.
Yeah.
Um, but that's just one example of if you have a malefic in a house, but then it's ruled by a really strong benefic, you can kind of
Mhm.
get a mixed bag of what might happen with what's going on in that house. But it will, at the end of the day, Jupiter is still the planet in charge of my sixth house. So Jupiter had to deal with Saturn, but Jupiter is the steward, is the landlord of my health and my recovery, and it ended up going pretty well in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely such a great example um, of how literal astrology can be sometimes.
Very
Um,
literal.
yes. Um, yeah, so I'm trying to think of an eighth house example for you guys too, because I know the eighth house isn't one that we've talked a whole lot about, and I have a pretty intense eighth house stellium. But there's almost not a perfect example coming to my head because there's so many eighth house things that just feel like they come up every single day. Um, but I guess my Saturn return story is one that makes me laugh pretty frequently. Um, so I feel like I've told this on here before too, but
And do you want to share what your eighth house stellium is too, to just
oh
give people
sure.
more context? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So my Sun, Mercury, and Saturn are all in Aquarius. And so for my Saturn return, I remember looking up the exact date that it was gonna be an exact hit. And I was like, at that point, I had quit my job. I had started my astrology business. I was working really hard. I was just putting so much time and work and energy into just trying to get out of all of the bad jobs that I've had in the past. And I was trying to like really make a name for myself and like finally do something different. Um, which of course brought up a lot of themes of taxes and all of those type of things like really came up around that time too. Um, but while I was kind of toying with these ideas, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just take a trip. I'm gonna go somewhere really fun for my exact Saturn hit. So that when I look back, I can be like, oh, I was doing something fun during this time. So I texted my best friend who was traveling to Arizona a lot at the time, and I started looking into flights and I was trying to find if she was going to be there that weekend and how we could meet up and, just starting to make these plans. And right after we kind of finalized the trip and right before I bought my flights, I got a letter that basically said I was being called to jury duty. And so I just thought it was such a funny example of like, Jupiter's in my fourth house, it's trining my eighth. Um, I have a I have a very strong Saturn. Um, so nothing bad happened during my Saturn return, but it just turned into 2 straight weeks of being isolated and like spending all day in my room. And I got a lot of work done and I was able to be very productive and it ended up being like a really amazing time. But at 4 p.m. every day, I had to check to see if I went in the next day because I couldn't make any plan until I knew. And every single day it said I didn't have to go in. So I just thought it was so funny and Saturnian to just like have to cancel a trip to just sit in my room for an entire week and just like finish working on projects and yeah, but I ended up getting a lot done and it just felt like it was one of those times where it was frustrating, but it was so astrology good that it was funny and nothing actually happened. And I had wondered if I had pushed it, if something would have happened. And that's something I look back on a lot. Like I almost feel like I got really lucky in the sense of like it could have been way worse if I had really pushed my Saturn return or done something against just following the energy.
Hmm. And I feel like that's also such a literal, like the eighth house being the
Right.
idle place, and you're
Yeah.
just like idle for two
Right.
weeks. So
And like jury duty just feels like such a like eighth house
yeah, that does feel
topic
very
anyway.
eighth
Like
housey as well, especially with that Jupiter influence and like the courts and
right.
the Jupiter trine to it.
Exactly.
I feel like another really good eighth house example for you is how you just like, whenever you travel, you just will not bring what you need and you'll
Yeah.
pack like so minimally, which is like so Saturnian, so Aquarius of like, I
Right.
don't need that much. But then you're like, oh, does anyone have toothpaste? Or I ended up needing
Right.
this or that. And then like you're always able to like community source the things you need and like the eighth house stuff. It's always other people's resources that you're
Right.
using.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, yeah, because I'll think I have something and then I'll show up and be like, oh, actually, my toothpaste is about out. I didn't have that. Or, there's always something that's missing. Or when we just went to Italy, it was really funny. I was given some advice to pack light in case I wanted to buy clothes there because there's so many street markets. And I was
Hmm.
like, oh, I love that. And I did, in fact, not buy clothes. I wore different shirts and the same pair of pants every day, basically. But we bought a pasta maker and John really liked these puddings that came in these like really cute little glasses. So we ended up with 12 of those glasses. And let's see, we bought a coffee pot, like a mocha pot, and some coffee and 12 tarot decks and and so my suitcase coming home, they actually pulled me aside and dug it up because they were like, "What is this?" Like there were like 6 actual clothing pieces in there and just like a bunch of metal. Um so yeah, it's very funny that I like I pack so light, but I end up bringing home things, or I end up
Mm-hmm.
just kind of collecting other stuff while I'm out. I actually was talking to somebody the other day, and he made a joke that anytime he goes anywhere, he's like chronically unprepared and he just knows that somebody's going to show up with what he needs at any point. And I was laughing. I was like, "Yep, like do you also have a packed eighth house?" And he was like, "Yep, eighth house stellium." And he had six planets there actually.
Wow.
Um, but then he had Jupiter squaring it and
Mm.
his was all in Pisces and um Gemini, Jupiter and Gemini. But I just thought that was very funny that like that's exactly my mentality too, is like, if I need it, it'll show up.
Mm-hmm.
Either because somebody has it or because there's a store and I can just go grab it. So,
As opposed to me, I have a second house stellium and in
yes.
Scorpio, no less. So I always like overpack and bring everything I need and never
Yeah.
trust that other people will have the things I need. And so I'm very like second house, like my own possessions, which I feel like is
Mm.
exacerbated by the Scorpio quality of that as well.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Absolutely.
the other example I really wanted to share was kind of digging into my third house as well, because as I shared, I have Jupiter in Sagittarius and Mars in Sagittarius as well. And every year for the past 5 years, I have needed to get some sort of body work done on my car. And cars is not listed here because you can't list every house topic. Like the font
Yeah.
would be so small. But cars are definitely part of the third house. You can see that kind of with the short trips as well, and like road trips and
Yeah.
stuff can
Or
be very third
neighborhoods
housey.
even. A car feels very
Hmm.
like neighborhoody.
Yeah, but like if you're like, where's my car in my chart? Like it would be your third house. And yeah, like every year I've got like a deer ran in front of my car in 2020 and almost totaled it. In 2021, I ran over a log in the woods, which I take full responsibility for. And I also needed to get my windshield replaced. In 2022, I was in this like really tight parking garage and I like sideswiped my car trying to get to work too quickly. Um, 2023, I was driving down the freeway and a tire just came flying out of nowhere and like ripped my front bumper off of my car. And then last year, 2024, I'm like, it's December. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've almost made it all the way through the year without any sort of car stuff. And then some guy just like ran a red light and like almost T-boned me and ended up like smashing up my front bumper. And so I've had like all of these awful like Mars in the
Mm.
third things where Jupiter has not been able to stop Mars from Marsing. Um, but they've all been okay. Like the guy who crashed into me, like my boyfriend swerved at the last moment, and so he like the guy just kind of destroyed my bumper, but if it had been a few seconds late, like I was in the passenger seat, I could have been hit. And then we ended up having a witness, which this was the first accident I've had that was like involving another vehicle and the other person was completely at fault. Um,
Yeah.
and like I hate the police, but if you don't have a witness, and you're not at fault for an accident, get a police report because it was almost impossible for me to get his insurance to cover the repairs because the guy just like ignored his insurance company. So like I got his insurance information, I made the report, but the guy like never called the insurance back. And if we
Yeah.
hadn't had a witness, I would have ended up having to pay for the repairs. So make sure if you ever are in an accident that ideally you have a witness, but that you have some sort of documentation if you're the one who's not at fault. But because we had a witness, I am now able to get my car repaired completely on the guy's insurance, and it's not going to impact my insurance at all, which is good because I'm to the point where I can barely make a claim through my car insurance because I've
Yeah.
had to have so much body work
So
done.
crazy.
But all of these accidents, like even the guy who crashed into me, like my car was still drivable for a few months, which was good because it was kind of a delayed process getting
Yeah.
the repairs to be set up because he was avoiding his insurance. Um, but it's like my car's always been like either drivable or insurance has come through or the repairs have worked out. Like I've never been injured in any of these accidents. I've never injured anyone else, you know. So it's like Jupiter always comes in and like softens it and helps
Right.
out and it like works out at the end, but Jupiter cannot stop Mars from Marsing in my chart. So I feel like that's another good example of house
Yeah.
rulership.
Yeah. It's so interesting when it's so literal like that, for sure.
It's like astrology good. Like it's so irritating. My
Yeah.
poor car is
Right.
like shellac at this point. But I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
Mars in the third. Like makes sense, I guess.
Right. Yes. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you? I feel like that's good for examples. Did you have any others you wanted to share?
Not at this moment. But I do feel like this could be an ongoing conversation. I see different crazy examples like every single day. Actually, I have one quick last
Yeah,
one.
go for it.
So we're teaching our astrology course right now, and a couple weeks ago we were talking about the ruler of the houses, and one of our students raised her hand and she was like, I don't understand the third house. And she was kind of asking us about her third house. Um, and we were like, oh, well, where is the ruler of your third? And I forget, actually, if I think for a second, she's a Scorpio rising. So what would her
Capricorn.
Capricorn? Yeah. Yes. Um, so she had a Capricorn third house, and the ruler of her third was in her eighth house. And so, or or vice versa. I actually don't remember. And so we asked her, like, what is your connection between your third house and your eighth house? Um, and she thinks for a second, and John starts asking, like, oh, it could be this or it could be that, or do you feel like you communicate through XYZ? And then I was like, do you have any, like, weird situations with your family and money? Like, sibling. I knew she was from a big family from a small town. So I knew she had a lot of siblings and. So I was like, do you have anything weird with siblings or aunts, uncles, cousins, whatever? And your money situation. Um, and she kind of just pauses for a second and she goes, yeah, yeah, I am. She basically started to then explain that she's in charge of her aunt's will. And she has like this family trust situation that like she somehow became like the person in charge of, even though her aunt and uncle like have kids, and like it turned into this whole wild conversation. Um, and I don't know every detail of it either, but I did think that was really funny.
Mm-hmm.
Um, her Yeah, so she would have had a Gemini eighth house. I'm trying to like actually
Mm-hmm.
remember the details. Her Mercury was in the third. Okay, so it's the ruler of the eighth being in the third.
Okay.
That's what it was. Um, Yes, because I think her Saturn was in Scorpio, so it was on the ascendant. That's okay. That's what it is. I'm back. I'm trying to like visualize her chart.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because there's been so many of them. But yeah, that's what it was. The ruler of the eighth and the third. But it was just really funny how that connection came through and she was like in charge of the trust for her aunt, like
Mm-hmm.
all these family members.
Totally. Yeah, the way houses connect. I'm actually going to share another really quick example to connect my
Sure.
third and sixth because I've talked about them both. That back in 2021, when Jupiter was in Pisces, I was living in Seattle and I moved to Fremont, so new neighborhood. And I was living right near Bastyr University, where you can get really cheap acupuncture from the students at the university. And so I started just like walking over to Bastyr and getting acupuncture all the time, which it was the first time I'd ever been introduced to acupuncture. I have childhood trauma, so I have a very dysregulated nervous system, and acupuncture was like the first time I was able to fully access like a level of safety and calm in my nervous system. Acupuncture has been incredibly healing for me in my life. I continue to get it almost weekly. It was a huge resource through my knee recovery. And so it was like this sixth house healthcare thing that became available to me because of the neighborhood I was living in. So there's that connection between my Sag third house and my
Mm.
Pisces sixth house.
Yeah, that's great. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so if you guys have any examples, please share them. I think
Yeah.
it's so fun to just see how literal these techniques are.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we would love to hear examples of how your house rulership shows up in your life
Um,
very literally, what connections you're seeing. So
yeah.
yeah, just let us know.
This could totally be a series too. I'll start paying more attention to different examples because
It,
we definitely could do so many more of these.
yeah, it's like we could be here for hours,
Oh,
honestly.
absolutely. For sure.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any personal stories to share or thoughts and reflections about what we discussed in this episode, please comment down below or reach out to us on Instagram. And please come follow us on Instagram at ConversationsWPlanets, where we share forecasts and updates about the astrological movements happening in the sky, as well as updates about our episodes. The link to our Instagram is in the show notes down below.